My name's Nathaniel Jackson and I run Jackson Speed, a media production company, and I also run Anycam Or Do, a filmmaking community. So we're a media production company, so we produce content generally for direct to client, so directly with companies and individuals who need content made. We work directly with them to come up with a concept or develop a concept that they have and produce it for them and deliver it for them. Alternatively, we go work with agencies and other sort of aggregate companies that work with other clients, and they bring work to us, and we work with them to then develop that content for them. And then thirdly, we make our own content and our own projects that we are developing and looking for our distribution opportunities for. Our day-to-day is very variable. Today is a day that we're all in the office, so we're working on quoting, replying to customers, reaching out to people we want to work with, doing admin, developing pitch documents, and a couple of the guys are working on edits for projects that we have to deliver, and some commercials, as well as a feature-length documentary that we're working on. But otherwise, on different days, such as yesterday, we were up at 4 a.m. in the morning. We're out at Parramatta shooting a corporate video, and that involves getting to the office, loading up gear, loading up the van, driving out to a location, liaising with the client, spending long hours working. A lot of the gear is heavy and a pain in the bum to move. But working with the client and then, loading up the van, coming home, doing all that sort of stuff again. And our job takes us to many different places. On Friday, we were out past Sydney Heads in very rough weather on a fast-moving boat, filming other fast-moving boats, getting drenched in water. On Thursday night, we were dockside, again on a boat, shooting a documentary, parts of a documentary, covered in water at night, freezing cold. And the day before, we were up again super early out at Cronulla, filming a commercial for Shandon. So we are in different places at different times. There's no fixed sort of 9 to 5. There's no fixed sort of expected times or anything like that. We can be working anytime in totally different areas and different environments. Huge amount of variety. So our day-to-day is hugely variable. Laws and regulations that we have to follow. There's not much that's beyond the common sense sort of laws and regulations that you need to follow as a citizen in our society, other than we need workers' compensation, we need to follow general safety procedures, because our industry is a complex industry. Anyone who works in the film industry is by and large going to be around heavy and expensive equipment, electricity, things that move like grips and jibs and dollies and things like that. So OH&S is a big issue. So general common sense and things like workers' compensation are a must. We need to have insurances such as public liability and all that sort of stuff. We need to get permissions if we're going to shoot people on private property. If we're on public property, we don't have to ask anyone's permissions. We do as a courtesy, but if you're in public, you don't have a right to privacy, so it's not really an issue. We need to be careful of working with children. We'll have working with children checks, and that's something that you have to sort of take into account. We have white cards, which means we can work on government places and construction areas and things like that. But by and large, you're following generally common sense and general courtesy. Any sort of laws and stuff that we have to follow, speed limits, load limits on structures and lifts and things like that. You just have to be aware of stuff, but most of it's pretty common stuff that Joe average citizen also is obeying. They probably just don't think about it. That's pretty much it. I guess the only other thing is if you're ever dealing with firearms and stuff, which we've dealt with occasionally, you by law have to have an armourer and things like that. The main thing is any job we do, you go through the process of looking at risks and assessing those risks. And most of the time we don't know what to do, so you call people who do, and you find out what needs to be done. And that goes into your plan for the shoot, and it's part of the production. Current trends in our industry is in a real state of flux at the moment. current trend is to push prices down for a lot of things. There's a lot less of an interest on traditional structure of a shoot. So shoots that back in the day would have been a director, a cinematographer, a camera operator, a camera assistant, a soundo, and all this other stuff. Much of it's being done by 1 or 2 man bands. There's a drastic less of a importance in many areas on having perfect quality visuals and all sorts of things like that. I mean, it's just in such a state of flux. Almost anything goes at the moment. And I know some people don't like that, but it's also a really exciting time to be in our industry. It means everything's accessible to, if you've got an interest, you can get into it. There's so much content being made. There's definitely a trend towards gimbals and user-generated content. So, you know, we've taught clients how to use their iPhones to film themselves, in a better way so that they can film content. And that content has then been collated and applied to an edit that's shot professionally and is used to tell parts of the story. So user-generated content's a big thing. Camera movement's a massive thing. Gimbals, drones, all that sort of stuff is everywhere, big and small. Smaller content seems to be vastly sort of more, so there just seems to be a trend in that direction as well. We have clients that, previously would have wanted a 10-minute corporate documentary, and now they want a dozen 30-second social media spots. And they're not even social media spots going out to the wider social media, they're going to their employees or something like that, but via social media. Definitely a trend towards shorter content. I'd just say there's a trend just for making sure, there's just such a demand for content. There's so much going on. Everyone needs video and masses of it. So the major trend is the fact that everyone knows more now about video, even if they don't produce video, than they did 5 or 10 years ago. And so there's a lot more knowledge out there's a lot more demand, and there's a lot more of an acceptance of the fact that if you've got a good idea that you can take a shot at it. You don't necessarily need to have 20 years of experience, on a $50,000 Red camera. You can turn up with a 700D and a little microphone and produce something that blows Coke away because you had a clever idea, and they're totally not going to have a problem with the fact that you've never made anything before. That's probably the biggest trend, is the requirement for industry experience is not there anymore. My advice for anyone wanting to get in the film industry. First piece of advice I would say is, if you want to get into the film industry, you're going to have to work hard. This is a brutal industry. If you want it, you can have it. But if you're not willing to put the time in, I'd bow out now. But the first thing I'd say is, get yourself a camera, literally your iPhone will do, and something you can edit, your iPhone will do, and make a documentary, a 1 to 3 minute documentary every week for half a year. You can do that. It's super easy to do. It'll teach you to find stories, it'll teach you to shoot, it'll teach you the unimportance of equipment. It'll teach you so much. You can do it in your downtime while you have a job, while you study, you can do it. But if you're unwilling to do it, the biggest thing it'll show you is you haven't got the persistence to survive this industry, because it's an unfriendly industry, it's brutal, it's hard work. You have to fight constantly, and if you love it, that's awesome. But if you can't make a short documentary, and it can be crap, it can be total rubbish, but if you can't do it once a week, every week for 6 months, I'd say, maybe step aside. But if you can, you will learn so much. You'll learn more than you will if you went to TAFE or uni, or if you did an internship at a production company. You'll learn so much. And the next step, aside from shoot and edit a little documentary once a week, every week, is put it online. Let people see it. No matter how bad it is, let people see it. You'll get feedback. You'll learn. In 2 months' time, you'll look back at what you did in your first week, and you're like, oh god, that's terrible. In 6 months' time, you will have made so much progress. That's my first step. That's the high speed way of getting skills, understanding filmmaking, and getting into the industry, because you will meet people. And if you're like, oh, I don't know what to do a documentary about, do a documentary on your parents, do a documentary on the guy next door, go see a store up near your house and find out what they do, how they got into business. Telling stories is our industry, is what our business is. From whether it's a 30 seconds Lowe's commercial or GIF commercial to a feature film. It's all about telling stories. So get out there, find stories, because that's everything. That's everything that filmmaking is about. So my first tip is make a documentary with your iPhone or whatever you've got. Don't chase extra equipment. If you can find friends that will help you choice, but you don't need them. Make a documentary every week, and that literally is a sit-down interview or a walking interview. Either way, an interview with someone telling their story, you asking questions, cut together with some footage of something else. That's all it has to be. If you do that every week for 6 months, you will kill it, and you will have a career guaranteed. So that's my first tip. My next tip is call people. I went to TAFE and I worked at Harvey Norman's, and I spent all my money on taking people in our industry out to lunch. And when I got into the film industry, it was a lot harder. So I took people out to lunch and I asked them what they did, how they got into the industry, what their job's like, all sorts of questions. And if you call people, a lot of them are going to say they're busy. And then you just ask, when would be a good time to call you? And they will tell, give me a call in a couple of weeks. And you stick that in a diary and you follow up. So the main sort of message in that tip is call people and always follow up. Opportunities are everywhere. You can find work everywhere. There's cool people, there's not so cool people, there's all sorts of people out there that you can talk to. There's all sorts of opportunities. You just need to go and get them. And the person who gets them is the person who does something and follows through. So if you call someone and they want you to call next week, you stick it in your diary and you 100% call next week. And if you have a good experience with someone, you stick in your diary 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, and you rank up and you go like, hey, it was really lovely meeting you 3 months ago. I just wanted to call and say how good it was. And that's how you build relationships. That's how you build connections with people. Call people, reach out. If you don't like talking on the phone, find a friend that does, or do it via email, but reach out to people. No one knows you exist, so you're going to have to let people know you exist. You don't have to ask for work. You don't have to ask to get paid or any of that sort of stuff. But if you call up and say, hey, I'd like to learn from you, people are generally pretty open to that. So that's the next tip. What else have I got? Don't obsess about equipment. No one cares about equipment. Clients occasionally care about it, but they're generally silly people. You can shoot on anything. You can shoot on an iPhone. You can shoot it really doesn't matter. Story counts. I mean, Searching for Sugar, Searching for Sugar Man was shot on an iPhone, or parts of it shot on an iPhone, and that won an Oscar. You can shoot on anything. Too often people get obsessed with equipment. It's really not important. Find motivated people. There's a saying that is that you are the average of your 5 closest friends. Find motivated people. If you're around good people, you're going to have a good life. If you're around negative people, you're going to have a negative life. It sounds pretty harsh, but if you have negative or unhelpful people around you, find new people to be around. Motivated people get things done. Good people, good things generally happen because they'll make things happen. So be around people that are going to help you achieve what you want to achieve. Just do it, make stuff. Don't be afraid to. I regret the fact that when I was getting into the film industry, I actually had a decent camera. I saved up my pennies and I bought a HVX 202 for $14,000 at one point. Oh, I didn't save up my pennies, actually. I got a loan. I was working full time and I got a loan for, anyway, I bought the camera. And, I did some work and, had some paid jobs. But I also had it sitting under my bed at times, and I just didn't know at that stage that you could go out and make short form content, because when I got into the film industry, that stuff just didn't really exist. YouTube didn't exist. Just make stuff and repeat the process. You can always redo a short film or a documentary and just make it a second time exactly the same, just with slight improvements. But just keep doing stuff. You will not hone your craft unless you do it. So keep making stuff. And keep sharing it, no matter how bad it is. Do not be afraid of something not being perfect. Too many people I've spoken to, they talk about their debut feature film, and they never go and make a feature film. And making a feature film is bloody difficult, but they're so obsessed with their first piece of work being out there and being amazing, because they've heard these stories of, some famous director whose debut feature film was amazing. If you are obsessed, if you could continue to focus on perfection, you won't get anything done. So make stuff, make crappy stuff. Don't be afraid of being rubbish, because it's the best way to learn. and we're all rubbish to start with. So yeah, make stuff, even if it's rubbish, put it out there, let it get attacked online, let it get eviscerated, let the trolls comment and say that it's garbage and you should, give up. Let that happen and just keep doing it, repeat the process. Because, in enough time, with enough repetition, you'll be amazing at it. And you will have met people, and you will have found people who are not filmmakers who now, you've connected with, you've learned about stories. You will have met people who want to make films, and you'll connected with them, and you'll be better off because of it. And you will have learned about how to frame things up and make them look great, even when the camera's not so brilliant, or, how to get good audio, even if you don't have all the gear that you want. You will have learned a lot. And if you get used to cold calling, you will find work. I guess the one other thing I'd say as a tip is we run a community called Any Camera Will Do, a website and a community called Any Camera Will Do, and we put on events, and we have like 200 to 300 people come to our events, and we got some sponsorship, and we have filmmakers talk about their films. We had very early on, we had like Kia Roche-Turner and Tristan Roche-Turner, the guys that made Wormwood. I don't know if you guys saw that film, but they made that film. They came and we did an interview with them and put that online, and we also had them come and speak at one of our events. Any Camera Will Do is, we haven't touched it for well over a year, and we're about to sort of relaunch it. But anyway, it's now something that functions. It has sponsorship and content, and when we call people happily talk to us and all that sort of stuff. It literally came out of my desire to know things and a frustration with people not wanting to talk about them. When I started Any Camera Will Do, other directors of photography wouldn't share how they lit something or did something. The sort of culture of sharing, which is now a lot more prevalent, wasn't there. One of the best ways you can self-educate yourself is by, either being part of something like Any Camera Will Do, or, other websites like No Film School or whatever, reach out to people like that and see if you can get involved. And if for some reason you can't, start your own thing. It doesn't have to last long, it doesn't have to be great, but if you called Baz Luhrmann and you said, if you've got no reason to call him, he's going to be like, who's this idiot? But if you call Baz Luhrmann and you're like, hey, it's Aidan here from, Aidan's film channel, and I want to, talk to you about, like filmmaking, like in this day and age or whatever, he might say no, but there's a reasonable chance that he'd be like, yeah, I'd love to share that information. Because people in our industry, especially people who've had at least some success, are generally very keen to share that information. And if you have a reason to talk to people, people will talk to you. If you stay in your bedroom and you play World of Warcraft, you're not going to find anything out. And if you wait for the internet to bring you information, you're going to be the same as everyone else. But if you go out there and you create a platform or join a platform or are involved with people, if you do something, if you're proactive, you can talk to anyone in our industry. It's all very accessible. And they will share information. Fortune favors the bold. If you act, things will happen. When I started interviewing people, I literally was interviewing people to find out information from other cinematographers that they would otherwise not share. Because I wasn't just going like, oh, I'm asking questions for this article generally. I was literally like, how do you do this? I don't know how to do this thing. How does one do this thing? And people were happy to share in that regard. All right, how did I get into this work? I got into the film industry primarily through brute force. I did go to TAFE, and I did the Advanced Diploma in Film Production way back in the day, and that was really useful. But just like many of my other students, I left TAFE, and that doesn't get you a job. What I did when I was at TAFE, I spent my money I earned from working a retail job taking people in the industry out to lunch. A lot of people like a free lunch, so if you ring someone up and want to chat to them, they'll be like, oh look, that sounds great, but look, I'm busy. When's a good time to call back? You call them back when they say, and eventually you take them out to lunch and you pay for their lunch, and they appreciate it. And many of them won't let you pay. They'll go like, no, that's really lovely, but they'll pay for your lunch. So TAFE, taking people out to lunch, was a big part of it. I joined the film industry at a time when you could, to some extent, buy your way in. That I don't think exists anymore. So when I joined owning an HVX 202, people were interested in that camera. It was the first of the sort of decent, non-tape based solid state memory cameras. And by owning that camera, I actually got some phone calls. People going like, oh, I did a lot of free work. I was a camera assistant on a lot of short films, a lot of projects and stuff. And the directors of photography on some of those short films would then pass my name on to a director who would ring me up and be like, I hear you have this camera, we'd like to hire you and your camera, and that was sort of some of my first jobs that I got. But yeah, primarily I got in by a lot of proactivity with calling people, chasing people, working on projects for free, doing a lot of free work. And free work's a dangerous thing. Like, you should always be open to taking opportunities. But free work that should be paid shouldn't happen. So if you work on a short film for free, choice. You want to work on a feature film for free, choice. But if someone's offering you a corporate film, like if you're doing a corporate video or something like that, and they want you to work for free, you need to be getting a lot out of that for that to be a good deal, because otherwise they should be paying for you. And same with internships. I'm rambling at the moment, so I do apologize, but internships are the same deal. There's a lot of internships out there where they want interns for free, and unfortunately they get those people to do coffees and basically work, and they don't pay them. An internship should basically be a boots on the ground education. So that intern should be next to skilled, educated people being taught how to do work. If you're not getting that, you shouldn't be there, and they are taking advantage, and that's terrible. So free work is a dangerous thing. There's places for it, such as short films, music videos, all sorts of stuff that generally don't have any budget, but then there are places where it really shouldn't happen. And internships, you should be very careful. But I got into the industry via a lot of phone calls, a lot of free work on short films and things like that, being motivated, being driven, and wanting to help people, and that led to work. And also just paying attention, like where is the market needs something you can provide. An example of that is I was a camera assistant on a pilot for a TV show, and we had a lot of equipment, and one of the pieces of equipment I had to pick up was a jib that we were hiring. When I got a whiff of the fact that the pilot was getting picked up and the show was going ahead, I asked the director if he cared where the jib came from. He didn't care so long as it was the same price. So I bought that jib and then hired it to the production, and over a course of a few weeks it paid for itself. So if you pay attention to where there's a demand for things, you can be successful. And the only other thing I'd say there is, and I would almost say this to every question anyone ever asks about joining the film industry, be on time. If your call time is 10 a.m, be there at 9:30. If you're not there at 9:30, if you are there at 9:31, you are late, and you will not be hired again. Being on time is utterly critical. Traffic's got nothing to do with it. Your family matters have got nothing to do with it. Your issues with your girlfriend have got nothing to do with it. The train timetable's got nothing to do with it. Be on time. That's how you survive in this industry, especially at the start. Always be on time, because you won't get a second warning. No one will say, look man, you need to be on time next time. They're just going to hire someone else. And in that situation, there's many a time where I did a job down in Wollongong and I was 2 hours early for a job, and you hang out, you have a coffee, and you'd be amazed at how many other parts of the crew will also be 2 hours. The gaffer will be there 2 hours early, and you have a coffee with him and chat, but never be late, because those people just don't get hired again. How do you find clients? How do you keep clients? How do you stay relevant? And also with a tangent on marketing, we find clients primarily through word of mouth. So we've done work, people like it, they tell people. That's primarily where our stuff comes through. And that works by being really good at what you do, really personable and positive, and following up, like, hey Aidan, I made this video for you. You happy with it? Awesome. Do you know anyone else that would like to, love to work with our services, or we could, supply our services to? Is there anyone you could refer us to? Yes, there is. Awesome. Also, can you give me a testimonial? Can I put something on my website about how much you like working with me? And you like working with me so much, you're like, yeah, absolutely. So the first step is word of mouth, and word of mouth is not passive. People forget that. So that's primarily where stuff comes from. Separate to that, we cold call. We call people and we go like, hey, we'd like to work with you. Or we reach out to friends or people we've worked with, and we see opportunities and we pursue them. So that's primarily that stuff. How do you keep clients? Keep clients by just doing good work and staying in contact with them, and meeting their needs. Like we have a client that's sent us an email the other day asking for a small change of something like, oh, how much does this cost? And it's tiny. And we're like, you don't have to worry about paying for that, because in the long run, work with them is going to be worthwhile, and charging for every bit and piece is not good economics. But you primarily keep clients by doing good work, but the most important thing is by talking to them and making sure that they're happy, because you can do a great job, but if you're not confident or if you don't communicate well, that client might not be happy with the work. Whereas the same job you could do, and then you could talk to the client and go like, this was really great, wasn't it? Really achieved those goals. Are you happy with this? And they're like, yeah, and that interaction they have with you is what's going to make them happy and confident. So a lot of it comes down to interpersonal skills and communication. We don't really do much in the way of marketing. We have a website, we have an Instagram account, and a few other bits and pieces. But primarily we just we sort of quietly build the relationships that we have with our clients and people that we want to work with. And yeah, primarily our stuff comes through a proactive approach to word of mouth. If you were wanting to get into the industry, advertising is not a bad idea. The main thing I would say is people make the mistake of advertising to other people in the film industry. So cinematographers shoot cool stuff and then they put it up on Facebook or Instagram and they push it in a direction towards other people who shoot things. Other people who shoot things are not going to hire you. If you push it in a direction towards the people who might be interested in your services, then you will make gains. So if you shoot cool stuff, let's say you want to make car commercials. If you shoot cool stuff with cars, it doesn't matter if it's not very good at the start with, but if you shoot cool stuff with cars and it's got clever ideas and you've got some content that you're making, you put that on Instagram and you could pay for some advertising on Instagram, pay for some search terms or hashtags or whatever it is. And don't direct it to, hashtag, Sony Ace 6300 or whatever it is. Don't tag it as, Panasonic GH5. But if you tag it as, Ford Australia and, car club stuff, but the people who have an interest in your content, not the people who have an interest in shooting your content, then, you can make some headway, make some impact with the people who might be interested in talking to you. So you certainly can advertise. There's loads of areas that you can do that. You just got to be clever and think who your audience is, think who your ideal customer is. You've got to do the business development work. It's boring, but you've got to do it. All right, so you want to be a cinematographer and you don't want to spend any money. You've got an iPhone or a phone with a camera on it.
Yeah.
You shoot with that. There's amazing stuff you can shoot with that. You look at movies and you start paying attention to what looks great that doesn't use the easy tricks of shallow depth of field or fancy lighting. You look at movies that have been done with natural light. You look at movies that have been done with wide angle lenses. You've got a phone, it's got a camera in it. You most likely can edit video with the same thing. Or you can buy a cheap as chips old video camera that's like a 1/3 inch chip, standard definition thing. There are very cheap tools out there that you can learn a huge amount from. You might not be able to use it on a professional job. Someone might not hire you for it, but you can really hone your craft and you can learn a lot. And restrictions are the best way of learning things. If you have access to everything, if someone gave you $1 million worth of equipment, you're not going to learn anything. But if someone gave you a $50, standard definition Handycam and from years ago with crappy dynamic range, you're going to have to learn how to make that thing work well. A great example of that is 28 Days Later, the zombie film. You've seen that? So 28 Days Later is shot on the XL1S, a standard definition I think 1/3 inch or 1/2 inch chip video camera. It's not high HD, hasn't got shallow depth of field, but the cinematography is incredible. And it's a very clever use of composition and lighting and camera placement. There's no reason why you need to spend a lot of money to learn your craft as a cinematographer. The best thing you can do is drop any obsession with gear and pay attention to what can be done with limited equipment. Too often these days we talk about full frame cameras and VistaVision sized chips and all that sort of stuff, and we forget that a huge amount of films have been shot on Super 16 and Standard 16, which is relatively small. And then there are even great films that have been shot on, mini DV, tape, and all sorts of things. So if you're not spending any money, get out there, shoot something. But the main thing is think about what it is you're wanting to tell what story you're trying to tell with what you are shooting. You don't want to just shoot randomly. Think about if you've got access to your brother or sister and they're in their house and they're just walking through the house, you're trying to make it spooky. What can you do to make it spooky? You're trying to make it look warm and inviting. What can you do to do that? There's practice, play with things, and jump on eBay and look at what's available for like a pittance of dollars wise that can be fun to play with, teach you a whole lot, and be consistent. Just keep doing it, repeat the process. I guess the other thing I'd say is if you want to be a director, just start directing. Find some friends, find a friend that wants to be a cinematographer, find someone who wants to be an actor, go out there and do it. I think it was Haskell Wexler who sort of said, he shot every single student film when he was at university. He shot all of them, good, bad, abysmally terrible, like everything. He just shot all of them. He accumulated a wealth of knowledge. The best thing you can do is chase as much experience and knowledge as fast as you can, and just absorb it. Do not be worried if something's crap. Do not, if someone says they want you to shoot a short film and you read the script and you're like, oh, this is awful. Doesn't matter. Just shoot it. Learn what you can from it. Just do a mile of them. Time passes very quickly, and most people don't fill their time with anything, and there's a huge amount of opportunity they leave behind. Just be conscious that every so actually the one thing I will say that I think is really worthwhile is every so often we hear from people, they go like, oh, I didn't have time for this. You have time for it. If you want it, you'll make time for it. And most people have got a plethora of spare time they just waste. They sit on a bus and they don't read a book or don't do any education. Their evenings, they watch garbage television instead of educating themselves or doing something. In their weekends, they go out and get drunk. You've got miles of time, put the time in, go and do things, find people who want to do things and make it regular. And don't be afraid of it being terrible to start with. Currently we are making a documentary about a girl called Lisa Blair, who's the first woman to solo sail around Antarctica. It's a feature-length documentary with a lot of reenactments. She's got a lot of footage from her journey. She's done her journey and had a lot of terrible things happen to her on the way. So we're working on a documentary. That's our sort of main big project that we're working on at the moment. We're also working on our first feature film, non-documentary feature film titled Screwhead, and we're hoping to shoot that next year. So these are our sort of first big projects that we have undertaken ourselves. We've made documentaries for other people. We've made miles of commercials and corporate films and all sorts of things, but these are the first projects that we're making for ourselves. So they're the big things that we're working on. Aside from that, at the moment the boys are editing. One of them's editing a commercial. The other one is editing a documentary for Wheelchair Sports. And so we've got that stuff in the pipe, as well as a bunch of other sort of similar things. Always be early, and then you're never late. Be proactive. Practice, just constantly practice. There's never a reason not to practice. Don't be afraid of being bad, because you will be, and if you're afraid of it, you won't do anything. So don't be afraid of that. Find motivated people. Think about your audience, and don't be concerned with perceptions. You don't have to have a big camera. You don't have to look the part. You just have to have clever ideas and interesting content. And if you do, you will succeed. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, if you don't know how to do something, you don't have to learn it yourself. You can ring up someone who's done it before and be like, hey man, I saw your video online, you know, like find them on Facebook or whatever it is, you know, ask questions like, hey, I saw your video and I thought it was freaking awesome. How did you do this thing? I want to do something similar. Or can I catch up with you for lunch? You know, ask questions. You know, the information's out there, people like sharing. That's
awesome. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
No worries, man.